So we promised that this class would be mostly a discussion class, but we had to do some setup first. And so that's why I'm sitting on the stool, to try to get down and say, hey, I'm no longer a teacher. I'm just I'm a peer. I'm a fellow class member, and I'm just going to help lead us in some discussion today. Because I fully trust that some of you have more knowledge in these areas than I do, and I want to hear what you have to say. Okay? Fair enough? All right, so in just following loosely our 7 days model, we're on day 2 now, and that is the day you connect with God. So I just want to start the discussion by asking a really simple question, which is, how do you personally connect with God best? So that's number 1, and then we'll talk about stages of faith, Lord willing, after that. So what helps you to connect with God? Nature. Good. Okay, so how many of you, nature is a big thing? So like 3/4 of you, that nature's one of your best ways to connect with God. Okay, what else though? Music. Okay, for how many of you is music a big thing? Okay, all right. What else? Reading?
Reading as well.
Yeah, okay, all right. Reading, or specifically the written word. All right. What else?
Conversations about God.
All right. Okay, conversations. Or community is kind of the part of that, right? All right. What else? Quiet. Just so I have enough space. I'm not prioritizing yours over everybody else's, but okay, quiet. Yeah. Prayer. Serving. Who said that? Yeah, that's great. So tell me more about that one, because that one's hard for me. That's not one of mine as much, and so I like to hear from people who look at the world differently than me. So how does it make you feel close to God when you serve? Give me an example or something.
I don't know. Like we just hosted a few people at our house.
Yeah.
And just cooked a lot over the last couple of days and sort of waited on people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it makes me feel like I'm doing something that God would have done.
Yeah.
There's nothing in it for me. I'm just like excited to do things that are going to make them
Okay.
enjoy their time.
Awesome. Shane, who's not here, I think might say that's one of his as well. When he feels closest to God when he's very active in God's kingdom. I'm more of the silent guy. I like to go out in the woods. But they're both equally valid, right? The point is not these, it's that, right? So whatever it is that gets you there is what you're looking for, right? All right, anything else? Do you find that sometimes one works better than the other? Sometimes I find that nature's probably my go-to, but sometimes it gets a little stale, or it doesn't work as much, and so then music becomes the thing. So here's my conception. Tell me what you think about this. My conviction is that God is here already. He's nearer than our breath all the time. But I don't always have a felt sense of his presence. So why not? If he's here, why don't I feel him? What's the problem?
Too many distractions and things.
Okay.
Preventing you.
Yeah, so there's something in the way, right? And it's not God's fault they're in the way usually. It's my fault, right? That I'm doing something. So distractions is a big thing. So how do we get the distractions out of the way? If God's already right here, and right here, and right here, and right here, then how do we get the distractions out of the way so that we can feel His presence, feel His power, tap into Him, His wisdom? Yes?
Well, this one kind of goes on both sides.
Yeah.
But fasting.
Yeah. So what is it about fasting? How does fasting help us get closer to God? Because honestly, until I was about 50, I thought that's the stupidest idea anybody ever had in history, because it does not help me get closer to God. It makes me mad. I don't feel that way at 50, almost 7, but at 50 or below, I did think that was just the stupidest idea. So help me with this, because this is a really hard one for me. How does that get you closer to God?
It's about discipline.
Okay.
When you, and like, have you been to Fest Service?
No.
So the whole 7 is on discipline. But like when you're fasting, that really is a discipline. It's
Okay.
It's not you doing it. It's God that's
Okay.
helping you get to it. And you can feel the power of God.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it helps to remove distraction because it puts your focus, like when fasting, you're constantly in tune because you're constantly having hunger pain or whatever it may be, whatever you're fasting from, and because of that you're constantly turning your gaze back to the cross or back to Christ or back to putting your focus back on what's supposed to be.
All right.
So it removes the noise.
Anybody else have any little hints for the rest of us who are not so good at fasting, how to make it better, how to make it a good spiritual discipline so we can connect with God through it? Because the Bible does talk a lot about it, even to the point of maybe being a command. I don't like that, but
I think it's important. When I fast, I'm always in scripture and praying more because it's like, well, number one, you have more time because you're not fixing yourself food and you're not eating. But instead of fixing yourself and eating, don't get busy with everything else. Get busy with
okay.
God.
So it opens up some time, some space. Yeah. Any other hints from any master fasters? Or even moderate fasters? Beginning fasters? Any ideas this front? I think what it does for me now, at my age, as I'm starting to embrace it a little bit, is that when I feel a desire, I realize I don't have to meet it in the way that I've always met it before. I don't have to say, hunger, I have to eat real quick, or any kind of, not just food, but any kind of desire I have, any kind of impulse. I can be curious. I can say, And so in psychology, what they call that is metacognition. So you actually stand up and watch your thoughts and watch your feelings. And when you have that, that's like a superpower. When you can do metacognition, my observation is, then you have so much more power over your life. And what happens is when I do that, I'm like, maybe I'm doing that because I'm anxious. Maybe I'm doing that because I'm sad. Maybe I'm doing that because I'm scared. And what's the answer to sad and scared and anxious? What's the real answer to all those? What? God. I mean, he says, right? What's he say in Philippians? Is it 4? Where about anxiety? Yeah, you cast your cares on him, right? So it makes it where I can say, instead of eating something sweet that makes me immediately kind of numbs out that feeling, what if I just get curious and I pray a little? Or I say, God, okay, you said you'd help me. Help me. So it opens up an awareness of your feelings instead of you immediately pushing them down. So that's what it does for me. But I'm a beginner. I'm in first grade at best. Anybody else? Any thoughts about that? Okay, so I have a list of 2 things that I'll hand out to you but you did a good job of it. One is the traditional spiritual disciplines, which are like fasting and prayer, those things. And from Richard Foster's book, Celebration of Discipline, which is kind of the classic. And then the other thing is from a book called Sacred Pathways, which is different routes that people use to consistently connect with God. And it's, again, you got a lot of those, nature, music, things like that. And so there are some others. And so what I would say is if you find yourself in the second half of life where your faith is getting a little stale, it's maybe you used to have this kind of awe of God, and now it's kind of gotten kind of old hat, and maybe it's just not as fresh as it was, or you're not connecting as well, or the rhythms you used to use are not working as well. Maybe try a different one. Maybe just try a different one. Hey, I've never tried fasting. I hated it, but let's try it again in the second half of life. See if it's better, Or music. Music's not really my thing, but hey, maybe you try some different music. Try it, see if that works. Does that make sense?
Does one of your handouts have this assessment in it?
It does not.
If you have any inclination and you're want to know more kind of about this, or you're like, why is that still now, and what has changed about me that I connect differently? If you want to explore that, there's an assessment that I can get if anybody's interested. I'll get it and bring it next week or something, and it's basically just like score this. How do you feel about these things? And at some point, then it says, oh, well, you connect best with nature. You connect best through this. It might be helpful for you I know as I've matured, like sometimes that's changed, and I say, oh, nature's mine for sure. But then there's like, oh, no, service is more of mine. So if you're interested, I'll bring some copies of that. You can assess it. Explore a little bit more about yourself. I think we want to push you to grow and learn in this class, so that might help your exploration if you want to.
So yeah, I wanted to cover that because I think that's at the heart of this day too. If you want to tap into God's power, you kind of need to connect with Him, right? Christianity, I'm more and more convinced the older I get, is an experiential religion. It's not just a set of facts that you learn in your head and mental sense that you do. That's part of it, but that's not. The heart of it is you have this relationship with God that you feel. And sometimes the feelings, I know, are untrustworthy. We can talk about that all that you want. But as a part of a relationship, you're going to feel something, right? And so hopefully you're going to have regular times of connection that you can actually feel. Now, if you don't feel it, connect anyway. I mean, read your scripture anyway, pray anyway, because we all go through seasons where the emotions are not there. So don't use those as your only guide. But I'm just saying the mark of a healthy relationship is you actually feel something, right? So I'd say just lean into that in the second half of life if you haven't in the first half. Okay? All right. Now let's talk about stages of faith. This is probably, I would say this might be the most important spiritual learning and revelation I've had in the last 6 months, is thinking about stages of faith. So I want to see what you have, because I've asked a lot of people and I got some really interesting answers. I'm basing this some on a book I've been reading, but I've gotten some fascinating insights from asking people who frame it a little differently. So I want to ask you, a new Christian walks up to you and says, hey, you have some gray hairs. Teach me about what I can expect on this journey of faith that I've just embarked on. I just was baptized last week. What can I expect? Let me give you another frame for it so you can start thinking. They look at, I'm just going to use my person, okay? Is that okay? So for me, the model of Christianity in a living human today is Jim and Martha McDermott. How many of you know Jim and Martha? Would you agree with me? I mean, I don't know anybody. They're not perfect, but I don't know anybody who's more like Christ than Jim and Martha McDermott. I've known them for 40 years now, 40 years, I think. And they were mentors to us when we were in college, and they've been mentors to us ever since. And they just keep being ahead of me. And so they keep being good mentors because they keep being 3 or 4 steps ahead of me. So I'm a brand new Christian. I've just gotten baptized, and my life's kind of messy. My life was not so good before, but I want to change. But I'm like, how do I get to be Jim and Martha McDermott when I'm 80? You might have your own person, but that's just my person. That's my people. So what do you think the stages of faith? Now, I realize that not everyone has the same experience. Not everyone, it's not like a rigid, oh, you're in step 1, now you're in step 2, and it's not like that. But there are some general things, A baby looks different than a toddler, looks different than a teenager, looks different than a 20-year-old. There are stages of growth that we can predict in our physical lives, so why not in our spiritual lives as well? So if you haven't thought about this, it might challenge you, but I think it's biblical, and I can try to prove that if you need me to. So what do you think? What's stage 1, maybe, of faith?
Excitement. Like when someone first becomes a Christian,
Yeah, yeah.
Have all this energy.
Okay. Yeah, there's usually is an sense of excitement, right? Sometimes the best evangelists are actually new Christians, right? Because they've I was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. It's a very exciting time. You've just realized there's this God in the universe, and He's good, and He actually likes you. It's a pretty giant deal. Now, I hope no matter what stage you might find yourself in, you never lose that one. You can always go back to every stage. And hopefully you do regularly. Hopefully every Sunday morning when you come to church and you worship, you sing, you're going back to stage one and saying, I just want to be consumed with the awesomeness of God, right? But for some people, that's their home base. So that's the thing. You have a little bit of access to the later stages, even if you're here, but it's not your home base. It's like, I would say maybe 3 times in my life, I might have actually had a relationship with God that looks like Jim and Martha McDermott, but it lasts for like a minute or an hour, and whereas theirs is just kind of where they live. Does that make sense? So I'm not judging anybody because I think all the stages have access to God. You can connect to God at every stage, and God loves it all. I mean, would you say to an infant, you're not as good as a 70-year-old? No, they're just different. But you connect with them. You have a real relationship with them, right? Okay, so not to belabor the point too much, but okay, so if the first stage is this kind of stage of I've recognized God and now I'm excited about Him. All right, what might come after that? Not that you lose that necessarily, but what could you add to that? What in your own experience? You've all been through, a lot of you, I think most of you, have been through faith for a long time now, in more than a decade for a lot of you. Maybe more than 2 or 3 or 4. So, what might be next to the initial excitement phase?
Learning, knowledge.
Okay, yeah.
I was going to say it'd be kind of like when you're in elementary school and everything is just learn it, like just memorization kind
Okay,
of.
all
I
right.
don't know what you would call that, but everything's maybe factual.
Okay, yeah.
You just do it because that's what it says to do.
All right. Good. I like it. Does that fit everybody's experience in your own life? Once you were initially excited and you're like, okay, now I need to actually learn something. I need to actually plug in and take a class and listen to the sermons and, read my Bible. Okay? That's very important, right? Okay. So you've been doing that for a while. You're learning, you're growing. Not that you ever stop learning. I think you always learn. I bet if we got Jim and Martha in here, they would say, yeah, I read my Bible last night. I learned something new about God yesterday. So it's not that you ever stop it, but maybe you've been doing that for a while, right? I figured out that I have heard more than 1,500 sermons, I think, in my life now. And so, I can still go to sermons. I can still learn new things, and they're still inspiring, but I've been there and I've done that, right? Maybe that's not the stage I need to just camp out in all the time. Okay, so if I would say, hey, I want more, then where might you move next?
Maybe the next stage would be like, okay, so like I'm gonna call it field. So for example, you go to a trade school, you learn all the skills and stuff, but then you go out into the field and you put in what you learned in practice. So the next one would be like a field. So I'm gonna go out and everything that I've learned, I'm not gonna put into practice.
Great. Does that fit everybody's thing? So you're kind of a little bit of a taker here, which is appropriate. It's not wrong, but I don't know anything. Please teach me. Please feed me. And you come to church to learn and to grow, maybe to feel like a part of something bigger, a community. But then at some point, somebody says, hey, you ever thought about serving Meals on Wheels? You ever thought about teaching a class? You ever thought about helping out in the nursery? Whatever the thing is, right? So you start actually doing things. So you go from in your mind more to in your body, doing. Okay, good. Does that ring true? And so practical part of this, and I'll revisit these in a minute, but is sometimes you can just serve where needed. So sometimes the chair system need to be set up, right? You don't have to have a spiritual gift of chair setting up to set chairs up, right? You just serve where needed. But then also you might start leaning into, I have kind of a gift with kids. And so maybe I could teach a kids class. Maybe that's my thing. And so you start learning a little bit more about yourself and how did God uniquely make me, which is a lot of this class, right? That's, as you go around the circle, finding your unique gifts is one of the things, right? All right. So, okay. So now you've found your thing. You've done your spiritual gifts test, and you've gotten out there, and you're leading a class, or you're leading a ministry, or you're serving in a ministry, or whatever. You're cooking on all cylinders, right? You're doing good. Is there anything beyond that? Exploration? All right. What do you mean by that?
It's when you learn things you didn't learn before, maybe the hard way, and or you test things.
Okay.
Validate
Test,
what you learned.
validate, and you mentioned something about the hard way. So there's a school of hard knocks that is different than the going to a class, right? Do you learn them differently? If you learn it from your own mistakes or from your own hard times, is it different than if you learn it in a class? Yeah. All right. What else? So that's Evan's take on the next stage. Yeah.
I don't know that this is necessarily the next stage, and this could go anywhere.
Yeah.
But learning how to deal with attacks of the enemy, questioning your faith, becoming stagnant, all of the negatives that kind of just come along with living life, they can go anywhere there. It ebbs and flows, I think.
Yeah. Good. All right. So yeah.
I think at this early stage, but I think that somehow through the learning and maybe through the exploration and the questioning, especially if you were raised like in the church, like I was raised my whole life.
Uh-huh.
So I would say in that learning stage, and maybe even some of the practice, it was still kind of my parents' faith.
Okay.
And then at some point through those next two, it started to become my own.
Okay. All right. So owning it, and whatever that means, however you're internalizing it, you're deciding for yourself, and that does sometimes involve a questioning, right? Is all these things these wonderful things that I've inherited from my family, from my whatever, from my church, is that really the answer? You might affirm yes it is, or you might say, hey, I changed my view on some things. God's is bigger than I thought he was, or something. Okay, good. All right. What about anything more? Yeah. Gratitude. Say more, if you will.
Well, at least for me, early in life when you're raising kids, you're out there, you're beating the bushes, trying to bring something home to eat.
Yeah.
You don't think about it, and once you reach a certain stage in life, it's a whole lot easier to look back. Look what all you get for it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even thankful for it at the time.
Yeah. That's good. That's real good. And you can see why I might talk about this for a class on the second half of life, because sometimes you finally get a pause. You get the silence that you needed, to the quiet, to kind of say, what have I been doing for the last 30 years? So you ever feel that way? You might get, it depends on where you are in the stages, but if your kids left the house and you're like, maybe this is a good time for me to rethink some things. Not in a bad way necessarily, or it might be a bad way. I don't know. It could be either. It could be a giant crisis in your life, or it could just be hey, time for me to look a little deeper, right? Okay, good. Anything else?
You start to mentor others.
Okay. All right. So
Learn more from teaching.
mentor. All right. Good. I like it.
I don't know where this fits in.
Yeah.
but, like trusting in trial and learning to really trust.
Okay.
But I remember a time like when David was in Chicago with Benjamin, and he called me and told me Vicky lost him. And I was driving to the airport, and I was with my son, and he said, what do we do? My oldest son, and he said, what do we do? And I said, we have to trust God. And we prayed, and I can tell you, I felt like an absolute peace in that time. That's the first time I think I've ever really felt God's, that trust in that time of trial.
Yeah. Yeah. So trials have this way of bringing out new things, right? Our faith takes on different characters in the midst of trial, right? All right.
I think at the same time that you're mentoring, you're understanding all of that, that just happened, and you're finding your place, like your purpose,
Okay.
your
So we kind of found one purpose up here when we got to practice, right? But now we're finding maybe a deeper kind of purpose, a different, like a second pass. Like this thing is iterative, like it's a spiral rather than just a circle. You go around it multiple times, and each time it gets a little deeper. Is that possible? You know, you had a real relationship with God, but then you come around and you learn things, and you're like, oh wow, my relationship with God's a little deeper. And then you go around again, and you're practicing, it's a little bit different. And then you go around again, and it's a little different. And you just keep going deeper, right? And the purpose deepens, the connection with God deepens, the way you answer questions deepens, the way you trust in the midst of trial deepens. Okay?
I think maybe a next stage too would be sacrifice.
All right. Why do you say that?
Because I think as we grow in our faith, and I always kind of look at it like a ladder. You get to those next stages, and when you get to the trials and the trusting, and you see that God continues to provide, maybe not necessarily in the way that you see Him, like you desire Him to provide, but in a way that grows you and your faith grows. And you start to be willing to trust Him with even bigger things, like maybe a move, or maybe a child that is considering a very different path, but you still see God in it, or
Yeah. And that's where I think if I have my way, I would like to see this class over the next 10 weeks or so really wrestle with some of that hard stuff, like when the trials of the second half, and how do we not only keep our faith, but maybe even have it look better on the other side, right? What's that look like? How do we support each other in the midst of some really hard stuff that doesn't have easy answers anymore? Yeah.
I don't know if this is a stage, but I'm just sitting here thinking, and I'm not there at all yet, but like wisdom and peace.
Oh.
If you have the wisdom to know how to handle those situations, but peace in those situations.
Yeah. Good. That's great.
Going back to mentor, I'm glad that was put up there, but I'm thinking more of like legacy, because in the second half of life, it's like, what do I want to leave behind?
Yeah.
The temptation is to leave behind something that I'm going to be remembered, but it's what can I leave behind that God will be remembered, maybe in my life.
Okay.
So the temptation is like, how are they going to remember me, or how are they going to remember God in me?
Yeah. I like it. So you said two real things. So one was just the general concept of legacy, and the other is this focus, which starts to shift from self to God, right? Okay. You feel that happen? Anybody feel that happen in your life? We're born with this really strong ego, which keeps us alive. Because if you didn't have a really strong sense of ego, another word for their survival instinct, then you would forget to eat. Like as a baby, you wouldn't cry, and they wouldn't feed you because they wouldn't know you're hungry. But so it's a good thing. It's a gift from God. But at some point, God says, you need to give it up, right? Isn't that kind of what life's about? Is you start out and it serves you, and then it messes you up. You ever had your ego mess your marriage up? I want what I want instead of what the other person wants. You ever had it mess your faith up? You ever had it mess somebody else up or your work up? I have. All those things, right? So the whole process of living and walking the Christian life is really about this shift, I think, from our natural self, day one, what we're kind of born with, to this kind of dying to self, right? Now we die to self here, but then don't you know what Rick Warren says, the problem with a living sacrifice, Romans 12, present your bodies as living sacrifices, is that they can get up off the altar. And so I'm very much a living sacrifice. Occasionally I crawl up there, but pretty soon I'm like, it's hot up here, and I crawl off again, right? So I think that's a lot of the whole, no matter what stage you're in, it's a lot about dying to self, right? And that's just it. I mean, those new people that are really excited, I'd say, well, you're going to have to die. Like, oh, man. That wasn't what I wanted to hear. So maybe you do it gently. Yeah, like mentor them very gently.
I think that there's probably more to the spiral.
Yeah.
But finally, I think where I always end up is where I have not ended up, but in my mind when I'm doing this exercise, is communion.
Communion
Yeah.
with God?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to try to present you what the book presents, just because they've thought about it a lot, and it kind of brings some order to some of this. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the goal, kind of, is and what some people say it, and it took me a long time to really start to feel what people were talking about. But we kind of go from up here, maybe working for God, to somewhere along the way, God is working through us. And then finally, God just kind of works as us. So what did Paul say in Galatians 2:20? I've been crucified. It's no longer even me who lives. It's Christ who lives in me. What's that even mean? That's a great mystery, but it's kind of it's this stage, right, where it's not, I even forget that I'm there almost, because it's not about me. It's just God's doing whatever he wants with this body that's still alive in this dimension right now, right? All right, so that's an awesome discussion. And so let me present it to you the way that they present it in this book. The book is called The Critical Journey, and if you like this, if this kind of resonates with you, I highly recommend it. So stage one is recognition of God. Recognition. All right? And we already talked a lot about what that one looks like. Stage two, they call the life of discipleship. So we use the word discipleship in a lot of interesting ways, but I think it fits here pretty well. The learning, growing, becoming part of a community, that kind of thing. Stage three is, they call it the productive life. So we talked about how you're going out and doing things, right? And then stage four is the one a lot of us, I think churches as they exist in 2025 are basically made to address these first three and not so much the last three. Now, there are lots of people in this particular church who fit in these last three, but they're harder to program. They're harder to have a program. Okay, I've just entered stage four. What do I do now? So what I have found, and maybe this is the only way you can do it, I don't know, I'm not sure a church can do this, but is you find individuals. So there might be a program to help you find God, and there might be a program to help you grow in your faith, and there might be a program to help you be productive. But when you get here, it's like, it feels pretty lonely sometimes. So you have to seek out individuals, is my impression. Now, if you disagree, please say so. But what this one is called is the journey inward. So you're trucking along, doing really good, and then either some crisis happens, whatever that is. Your marriage is falling apart, your health is falling apart, somebody really close to you dies, or you just say, I don't understand all this anymore. It's just, something happens and it's just different. You ever felt that? You ever felt like I'm on this inward journey? And so what happens a lot of times, I think, don't let me preach here, correct me if you think I'm preaching, is these people are real, if you're in charge, you like these people. So as a business owner for 20 years, I really like people at this stage in my business. I don't really want them questioning my rules. I like, okay, I have some rules, just follow them. Go out and see lots of patients, It's like, this is where I want my employees to be. They get here and it's a little messy. It's like, why are you questioning our standards? It's just, I've already done that for you. You can just trust me, right? But then they become a little less productive, right? And you ask them, hey, can you teach class next quarter? And they're like, no, don't think I'm not at that season right now. Like, what happened? You were one of my good teachers. But now you can't. You ever felt that way? You ever said no to something that somebody asked you to do, but it wasn't really a selfish thing? It wasn't really bad. It's because you're at a different place and you need a little space, right? So I would say, if you see people like that, honor that. Okay? Now, in stage 4, there's this little thing called the wall. And I don't know if you've hit this before, but I think a lot of people by our age have hit something like a wall, right? So how many of you think you've hit some kind of pretty major wall in your faith walk at some point? I have, I know. Okay, maybe half the people raised their hand, the other half did, but they just didn't say. No, I don't know your experience. Honestly, I shouldn't be funny with this because it's a very serious thing. It's what's a wall look like? Somebody be brave. Tell me what a wall might look like.
Something didn't turn out the way you thought it would. You did everything you were supposed to do when you followed 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And you were being productive, and you raised your kids in the right place, or you did the right thing in your career, or you made the right decision, and you still didn't get what you thought was supposed to be there at the end of it.
Yeah. You ever had this notion that if I just do what God says, then God will give me what I want? You ever had that disappointed before? Yeah, I have. I mean, it's really hard for me to even talk about, but my kids have done some things I'm not very proud of. And I can tell you, it's harder to see your kids go through something bad than it is for your own self to go through something bad. And I don't know always what to do about that. I don't have a lesson here to teach you about how to get through that either. I can just tell you I have walked down that road some, and it's not fun. And it's a major wall. It makes you question everything about your life and what you did and everything else. So that's the kind of thing that I think we need to be addressing in this class, just to be honest. Otherwise, I mean, because we've all done all the learning and stuff. We've been doing that for like 40 years. Okay, now let's come here, right? Now, different people are in different stages, so I'm not judging where you are. You might be at a different stage. But for a lot of us in the room, I've known you for 30 years, and I know that you're probably either you've been through this, or you're about to go into it, or you're in the middle of it, or something. So there's some options when you hit a wall. What are they? What?
Anger.
Yeah. You can have lots of emotions. And is that okay with God if you're angry? When I've hit a wall or two in my life, some of the advice I've gotten is just read the Psalms. Read a Psalm every day. Is anybody angry in the Psalms? Yeah. So it just validates. It's okay. Feel it. God's big enough to handle your anger. Yeah, what else? What else might we do when we hit the wall?
Just go back to 3.
Yeah, that's probably the most common thing. So some people actually, when they hit the wall, they just jump off and they go to 0. They lose their faith, right? But the fact that you're in a Sunday school class means you're trying not to do that, I think. You might be struggling with that, and that's okay. Talk to me afterwards. Not that I know how to help you, but I'll walk alongside you if that's where you are. Been there too. So, but yeah, the most common thing I think is to just say, that's too hard. I'm going to ignore that. I'm going back, and I'm just going to do something. And is that wrong? Is it wrong to say that's too much and go back and just be productive? I don't think it's wrong. You're still in the journey of faith. You're still connecting with God. You're just saying, that's so heavy. I don't know what to do with it. So it's okay to eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? Some people stay in the wall for like 10 years or more, right? It's okay. Maybe that's your unique journey. I'm not judging you. Some people might have a pretty easy wall, and they push through it in 6 months and they're done. Other people it might take you half your life to get through it. It's just one of the stages. It's just one of the things that happens in life. Okay, so one thing is to just revert back to a previous stage. One is to just jump off altogether. What else? What else might we do? Okay. All right. So one of the words that characterizes this stage, according to the smart people who wrote the book and studied lots and lots of people, is healing. You ever felt like I need to go into a stage of healing in my life? I would say, I'm going to speak for my wife. I think we have been in an intense journey of healing for the last 5 or 6 years of our life. Because when you ever notice that when you have one trauma, it reactivates all the traumas you've ever had in your life before. So something bad is happening here, and all of a sudden I'm remembering stuff from my past, that something that happened in my childhood that I thought I'd already let go of, but it comes back because I didn't really deal with it all the way. So freedom prayer is an example, a beautiful, wonderful way that explicitly says, yeah, it's a wall, and you got to go through it, but God can help you. It's another opportunity to connect with God. So I love freedom prayer in that way. Yeah.
Now, when you're in the hard times, you gotta remember the devil's in the details. I think that was first to get out of my way. And just going through your rush, to church, class, with people. And I'm a little different because I know some people have more issues with the past and everything.
Yeah.
Just gotta let it go.
Yeah. Sometimes that's right.
Mine's anger. Sometimes I get voice out anger to move on.
Yeah. Sometimes that's it. Like that all these trite phrases are that we have them for a reason. So let go and let God really does mean something. It sounds so, hokey, but there's a lot of truth to it. You just let it go. Eventually, you just lay it down. Okay, whatever happened to me, I've let that go. God, you take that. I'm done with it, right? And you just move on.
And there is spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
That's just what the devil's in the details.
Absolutely. Does Satan love to use this to try to pull people all the way off the track? Absolutely, he does. God can also use it in a beautiful way to take you to another stage. So let me tell you about the other two stages because we don't have much time. Stage 5 is called, what do they call it? Because it might be important. The title. Oh yeah, I remember now. The journey outward. So that's the handout. Yeah, you can give it out. I just didn't want to give it too early and make people not talk. So the journey outward. So at some point, I love, anybody know the poet Wendell Berry? He's one of my very favorites. He's a Kentucky farmer who writes poetry. So you got to love that, right? A farmer who writes poetry. So he has this little poem that says, after you've tilled the ground long enough, at some point you just have to go and plant. And so I feel like the healing stage is appropriate. And you might stay there for a long time, but at some point you say, okay, I've done some healing. I've pushed through. Now it's time for me to just go back out in the world. I'm not perfect. I haven't healed completely. I'm not a totally selfless, Christ-like person in every way, but at some point I'm ready to go ahead and plant my crop, right? Now, does the crop that grows look different if you've tilled the ground well versus if you haven't? So this is the tilling of the ground here. So the crop you can get can be much richer, much bigger, much deeper, much different if you've tilled the ground well. But at some point, you just do have to plant. So you go back out, right? And you start finding purpose in a different way, a deeper way. And one of the criticisms of people in this stage, you might know some of you might be in this stage, is some people start to look impractical in this stage because up here, it's all about productivity. So I'm going to bring up 500,000 people to Christ. And here you just want to talk to your neighbor. Or, I think you need to teach the auditorium class where you can reach 1,000 people. At this stage, you might say, I just soon changed the bedpan of the woman at the nursing home. You see how there's an impracticality to it. Why would that be? Why do you think that would be at this stage? Now, that person might also get up and preach a great sermon. You can do both in this stage. But why would it maybe become where you might just as likely be emptying a bedpan and nobody ever knows as preaching a big sermon?
I think you reach a lot of humility by then.
Okay. So it's really not about you anymore, right? It's not about your ego. It's not about your accolades, about getting strokes, right? It's something different. It's just God starting to work through you, right? And if God wants to change a bedpan, okay. Yesterday I had this great plan to work on this class and do all these things. And I'm going to show you that I'm probably not in stage 5. That's my point of this story. And about 5 things came up around the house that I needed to do. And I was a little angry. It's like, why did that break? And then why did that break? And then my son calls me and says, the air conditioner's out. I'm like, it's 95 degrees. And air conditioner. So I had to go try to fix that. And I don't even know how to fix anything, And so, like all day long, it was God was saying, see how selfish you are? See how selfish you are? See how selfish you are? Because I wanted to just sit and do my thing. But God kept saying, go serve this person. Go serve that person. Go serve that person. And I guess if I was really in stage 5, I'd say, whatever you want, God. But I said, okay, I'll do it, God, but it's making me really mad. And can I get back to my movie? It's like, so this stage, you start to not say that as much. Okay? And then stage 6, they call it the life of love. And it's really just a maturing of stage 5. And that's where I think that's why I pointed to the McDermotts. There are other people in this church, by the way, who are in stage 6, I think. Not many, I bet, but I can think of 5 or 10 that I know of. You might know more than I do. But I can think of 5 or 10 people who are really in this stage where it's just not about them anymore. They just whatever you need, they're there for you. And they don't, it not only doesn't make them mad like it does me or whatever, it's actually just who they are. If I get one more breath, I'm thankful. I'm going to have gratitude, and I'm going to just do whatever God wants me to do. So I think that's the aim. So becoming Christ-like, so Jesus is the perfect. So just read the Gospels and read Jesus' life, and you can see what stage 6 looks like. But it feels so far away sometimes. Like, how am I ever going to get there? Well, you're going to get there through this. And unfortunately, most people, I don't know, maybe there's exceptions, most people are going to have to go through this. And it's hard. And it's full of trials. And I think for a lot of us, if you've maybe hit it a time or two, but then you didn't go through it, you just went backwards because you were busy, life's busy, my career's busy, my kids need me, or whatever. Maybe now you have a little time in the second half of life to say, okay, I guess it's time for me to go through the wall. It's time for me to do whatever it is. God, I'm not saying God caused it to happen, but I think you can ask the question, what is this thing here to teach me? You can always ask that question, right? Because God redeems everything. And, I think I've been in the journey inward for a while, and who knows, maybe I have hit some walls along the way. Maybe I've taken 1 or 2 bricks out of the wall. I'm not sure I've got them all out yet. But if that feels like you, then that's what we want to really talk about in this class, is how do we help each other through this? Now, if you're already here, that's awesome. Help us see how you got through the wall. Or if you're here, that's fine. We need those. We need everybody. Help us remember how to worship good. Help us remember that there's still things to learn. I mean, no matter what stage you're in, you can serve the body of Christ. But if you happen to find yourself in this one, no, it's not abnormal. It's a part of the faith walk. Okay? I think that's it. Thanks.